Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. I'm Kamenenchev with Tom Castleman and Drew Brackett, who's back from his bye week. Welcome back, Drew. We've got a great show today, plenty of basketball talk. Joel Embiid and James Harden are on fire. They're cooking for the 76ers, but is Philly the favorite to win the ring? Ja Morant is on absolute fire. What are his MVP chances? What's going on with LeBron and the Lakers? And it's officially March 1st. So, of course, we're talking college hoops and March Madness. We'll have all that and much, much more.
Yeah, NFL Combine will be kicking off, but looks like where we'll begin the show is actually with baseball of all sports. And sadly, not for the reason you think. We're going to get into some of the nitty, some of the gritty as far as that goes without bogging down too much in numeric details. We're just going to kind of overarching touch on what exactly happening between the MLB and the MLBPA.
Yeah, and that just came down as we were recording, basically. And Tom, I know you follow baseball probably the closest out of the three of us. What's the latest on the lockout?
And he's
Yes.
contract Castleman, by the way, so he knows all the money.
Of course,
Whenever we got a little financial money story, he's the one we go to.
Absolutely. Well, nothing is more a bigger story as far as contracts go than one between ownership and union, and that's what we have going on with baseball right now. So, basically, as where we're sitting, is that the most recent news is baseball has decided to cancel the first week of the season, basically the first two series, and this is due to a self-imposed lockout, self-imposed deadline that the MLB ownership has been putting forward. None of this is has any legal basis whatsoever. There's no reason why, if a deal's not done, say tomorrow at some point, that they couldn't still play these games. This is a negotiation tactic on MLB and the owner's part, basically to try to squeeze as much as they can out of the players. This is a situation where players realized in the last bargaining agreement with some of the labor practices that were put forth in terms of, if you hold down your star player for a couple of weeks at the beginning of the season, you get an entire extra year of contractual control. So that's one of the things that the players are fighting against. Another thing, of course, is spending in baseball. We see baseball franchise valuations are going up by hundreds of percents every a single year, basically. And so where that's kind of leaving the players is saying, like, hey, there's a lot more revenue coming in that we're not getting in equal cut. And of course, there's also the competitive balance tax, which acts as a sort of cap on how much money teams can spend. It was put in place with the notion teams, say, like the George Steinbrenner Yankees going out and buying entire free agent classes, and other franchises saying, hey, we're poor, we're in smaller markets, we need to have a little bit more competitive balance. And actually, all that's done is basically taken those big players at the top of the market, disincentivize them to spend over a certain dollar amount, but then the teams at the bottom aren't thereby spending more. So basically, the two sides are pretty far apart as far as I can tell on a lot of these terms for the labor negotiations, and baseball has decided, again, unilaterally, there's nothing that the players could do about this because it's a league-imposed lockout, and the league itself is choosing to cancel games. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now as far as just like the facts of the case go.
Yeah, so my thought on all this, obviously I did read some of the numbers, but I am a statistical number guy, not a money number guy. But from everything I understand, it's pretty much that we have the owner's greed. And I'll be honest with you, those baseball fans that are remaining, which by the way are significantly less than we had 10, 20, 30, 40
Sure.
years ago, they don't pay for the owners. They pay to watch Fernando Tatis Jr., Shohei Ohtani, Mike Trout, like all this baseball talent that the league has. I know we talk a lot about the young quarterbacks in the NFL, the young point guards, the young stars in the NBA. Like baseball has a lot of young stars itself, but they don't know how to market them. I mean, they have no clue in terms of what they're doing. It's the worst mismanaged league in sports, not only American sports, but I'll go as far as in the whole world right now. And baseball is just an absolute mess. And they're in a bad position, even if this lockout thing wasn't happening, because a lot of those baseball fans are tuning the game out Basketball has overtaken baseball as America's #2 game. Football was always king, but baseball's ratings are down. Baseball's attendance is down. It's just not in a good position. And it makes me think of what was it now, 2 years ago? It's funny that that was 2 years ago. It feels like an eternity ago, but honestly, baseball had the opportunity to be the first sport back during COVID. They had a chance to grow their game, be the only sport on the market, and they blew it. They blew it. They came back late. They were not the first sport back. The NBA was back sooner, and they lost a lot of their spotlight. And for me, honestly, I told you this, Tom, and I mentioned this on my own work show as well. Like, I love all sports. I do enjoy baseball. It's probably at this point, like it used to be #1 for me, and it's now number 4, 5, 6. Like it's behind basketball, football, soccer, tennis. But this summer, there's no Olympics. There's no soccer tournaments this summer. For me, I was actually going to watch a decent amount of baseball this summer because there's quite frankly nothing else to watch in the summer. And they're losing me and they're losing my interest. I know they'll be back by the summer, but I'll be a little more turned off. So baseball needs to do everything it can to play. These owners are making a boatload of money. Just make it happen and let's play the games because this is absolutely pathetic.
Absolutely. Well, I think like what we're seeing here is, and this is kind of going across the board in sports, it's an overarching larger issue, is that we're losing the personal owner. We're losing, the big multi-millionaire who buys a team back in like the 80s when they're going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's gotten to the point where these businesses, essentially, is what a sports franchise is, have grown so large that no one single person can really afford to buy it. So what's happening is that investment firms are buying into these markets now, and they don't view baseball. And this is kind of true a little bit for other sports, not nearly as much, but it's definitely going to be trending this way, where they don't look at the sport as something that they enjoy. They look at it as a pure asset. Is it making or is it losing them money? And, gone are the days where you could have somebody like, I think Jerry Jones is probably like the best example, right? He made all of his money in oil, and like the Dallas Cowboys are worth a ton of money. But even if they weren't as profitable, even if Jerry Jones was losing a little bit of money on the Cowboys, I don't think that he would really sell that because he just loves football that much. And I know that he gets a lot of flack from people for a number of different reasons, but I think that type of owner is going to be missed a little bit across sports, the advocate for the game, because once upon a time when we would have these negotiations, at least both sides were kind of sort of advocating for the continuement and betterment of their game. We don't really have that anymore. Now it's gone strictly to a game of numbers across the entire board for baseball in particular. So I think that's another thing that we're kind of seeing here is just the owners of baseball don't really seem to like baseball or care about baseball, which leaves us in this incredibly odd position, I think, which is not necessarily mismanaged, as you put, Common. Like, that would require, like, it's mismanaged for fan perspective. It's managed exceptionally well for a money perspective. So that's just kind of where I think things are sitting right now. I mean, if they were being honest, if owners were being honest, they don't really want to have more games. I actually don't disagree with them on that front. I think if you took out the entire first month of the season, if you had the season go from May through September, and actually I'm like getting into statement of the week right here on accident, but if you shorten the season from May until September, I'd be good with that. 125 games a season type of thing. You play like 24 days a month, regular rest for player. Like, there's a lot of benefits if we actually do shorten the baseball season. But what's the problem is that ownership's not being honest about that being a goal for perhaps bettering the game.
Yeah, just a couple final things before I'll get Drew's take. I don't know if Drew has anything to say, but just a couple final things on my end. You bring up some good points, Tom. The reason why I wouldn't want to shorten baseball, not necessarily that it's very hard to be captivated into a game for 162 days. Believe it or not, when I was in middle school and high school, I was that guy that watched
I could believe that
more than 300 baseball games of the Cubs and Sox. That's literally why back then I would never predict things wrong because I feel like I knew the teams Well, I don't have the time nor the patience to
Were you
watch
the
that
bat
much
boy
baseball
or
now.
what?
But the reason why I would
Hustling up
like,
and down the red line.
the reason why I would like to have all the baseball games is I'm a stats fan, and I feel like you're taking away statistics, career statistics, guys playing less games as opposed to playing, 162, they're playing 125. Then it's going to be hard to see records broken.
Mhm.
So that's something that I would miss out on. But as far as what you were saying about baseball and the owners not caring about the game, I 100% agree about that. That's something that actually, in the brief reading and watching of this issue that I saw, that's exactly what I've seen across the board. I know Jeff Passan talked about this and wrote about this. He's one of ESPN's, maybe one of their biggest, if they're not their biggest sports writer in baseball. And he's kind of talked about what you kind of talked about, and I completely agree with it. And I immediately thought of Steve Ballmer, I think the Clippers owner, who I think owned Microsoft, a rich guy that loves the game. Mark Cuban, another guy like that, those guys in the NBA. And then I also thought of the Cubs, the Ricketts family, how they completely sold the entire Cubs roster. And here are some like silly Cubs fans who seem to think like, oh, they'll figure it out. They're just saving money for the future. No, they're saving money for themselves.
Yes.
So the Ricketts family immediately came to mind when you mentioned like owners not caring for the game, not caring for just the sport. They're very interested in profits. That's why a lot of teams tank. That's why there was years ago when the Astros were one of the worst teams in baseball. They had like the best revenue share because of their strategic way to make money. And the owner of the Astros didn't care that they were losing games. They were making money. That's all that mattered to him. So I actually 100% agree. I know a lot of times we disagree. I like being bold and disagreeing with you, but I think we're pretty much on the same page here. And the other thing, Tom, that we're seeing in other sports, players are getting a lot more power, especially basketball, maybe even too much power, as I said, maybe too many trades happening. But in theory, like the players getting a little more power does make sense to the faces of the league, et cetera. Even in the NFL, they're getting more power. We had almost like a big issue over the combine and the COVID restrictions. And, players said they weren't going to go to the combine if this didn't get fixed because they couldn't have all their trainers, et cetera. And the NFL immediately said, you know what? That's fine. We'll lift these restrictions. We'll take care of you. And then everyone's at the combine. So it seems like the other owners in other sports, which, by the way, for the most part, all owners in all sports are greedy, and a lot of them have their own issues. But relatively to the greed that we see in other owners, the owners seem to care at least a little bit more about the players. I mean, I do feel like Adam Silver in the NBA, at least, I think he cares. It seems like Adam Silver cares for his players and his league brand. And then I saw something else about Rob Manfred, the baseball commissioner, calling the championship trophy a piece of metal, like as if like it's not important. So it almost seems like he doesn't care that much either. And I have an important thing that the owners of baseball need to know. And just a general thing people in life should know. Live by this. Life is about more than money. If money is all you're interested in, then you're not living life the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a good maxim by which to live.
Anything else true, by the way, before?
Yeah, you guys have covered it in the last few minutes here. So
just
well done with that.
Just a few.
You want to move on to the NBA?
Sure. This is what I came here to talk. Tom requested we move baseball to the front of the show, and given the breaking news nature, I do agree with it. We definitely had it a little bit lower down. I came here for the NBA talk today, so let's do it.
Yeah, sure. It was Joel Embiid, James Harden. They're together on the 76ers, and they've been dominating, guys. What do you think? Are they the new favorites to make and even win the NBA Finals? Or too early to get excited?
Well, I think I'll say this. If I were forced to choose, I would give a very slight edge to the field over the 76ers. But if I'm asked to pick one team as far as who is the favorite, I do have to go with the 76ers. Right now, I look at them having about a 50-50 chance to win the finals, maybe like 49-48 if I'm forced to pick, and a 60-40 chance to make it there. And that's simply because, and the only reason why I'm not even more adamant about it, I feel like if Harden and Embiid are fully healthy, and you told me right now that they're guaranteed a clean bill of health the rest of the season, I'd go as far as saying 60% chance they win the whole thing. I think they have the best 1-2 duo in basketball without question. The only question mark for them is like, what's going to happen when the game is close at the end of the game? It is a little too early. We can't make, too accurate of a prediction because we've only seen 2 games. But I mean, they won 125-109 against the Knicks, 133-102 at the T-Wolves. By the way, the Knicks are a really good defensive team. So 125 points on the Knicks is not too bad. Harden's averaging 28 points, 14 assists, 9 rebounds, 2.5 steals, and only 2.5 turnovers. Shooting 58% from the field, 57 from 3, 95 from the line. And beating those 2 games, averaging 35.5 points, 9.5 rebounds. So do I expect them to beat everyone by double digits? No. They're obviously off to a start that they won't be able to keep up with. But what we have seen this season, a healthy Joel Embiid. And if he does stay healthy, he leads the league in scoring, likely the league MVP, whether I agree with it or not. I think he's phenomenal. And you look at the way you win a ring, typically in recent years, it's been with dynamic duos. I know last season the Bucks didn't win with a duo, even though obviously Middleton and Holiday probably a little bit underrated, but that's simply because the big duos all had injuries. The Nets had injuries. The Lakers had injuries. We had even the Suns. Chris Paul was a little bit banged up late in the playoffs there. Obviously, Steph Curry didn't have Clay at the time. So there were a lot of extenuating circumstances that led to the Bucks winning that ring. Same for the Raptors, the year that, it was Curry, Durant, Thompson, and Durant and Thompson both get hurt. I mean, I think we agree if one of those guys had stayed healthy, the Warriors were still winning, especially if it was Durant. What is great about them, there's a few things. Because you look at the other 1-2 duos in the league right now, Anthony Davis has been so hurt, and he's definitely regressed. LeBron and Davis, I don't think are as good as them. Even if you look at the Nets, CP3 is hurt right now. He gets tired late in the season. I don't know what's going to happen there. But what I specifically like about this duo, this is a traditional 1-2 guard center duo where they don't get in each other's way as much. You look at like the Bulls, DeRozan and Levine, who we love, Tom. They're both perimeter players. Even the Celtics, Tatum and Brown, both perimeter players. CP3 and Booker, both perimeter players. Steph and Clay, both perimeter players. So it's one of those things where even Durant and Irving, both perimeter players. So it's like obviously having 2 of them at once helps you, but it sort of negates it a little bit because it feels like the greats are sort of taking turns as opposed to the Sixers. You can literally utilize both of them in the same way because you can have Harden running the point and dishing it out to Embiid, and they're not so much like trading turns, getting in each other's way. Obviously, they'll have their ISOs like all-stars do, but the center and guard combo has worked historically best in the NBA. I mean, back in the day, that's what you needed, Magic and Wilt. Obviously, in more recent years, LeBron and Davis. We had Duncan and all those Spur guards. We had, even
Kobe and Shaq.
Kobe and Shaq was my next example, and Shaq and D Wade worked really well. So I think what we have here is a duo that in theory works really well. And what I like about Harden is he's a willing passer. He's second in the league in assists, James Harden is. And in Houston, obviously he was by far the best scorer. So he was leading the league in scoring. But even in his brief time with the Nets, he was willing to be the second or third scorer on the team. He's willing to let Embiid be the leading scorer just because he knows, hey, I can still get 25, but also get myself 10 assists, which, by the way, is the season average. So I think right now they've got to be the favorite to win it all, given that, the Nets got disbanded, losing Harden, given that the Warriors and Suns, the 2 top teams in the West, they're both dealing with injuries. You look at the East, the Bulls are struggling a little bit more now. So I think Milwaukee will be a tough test because they obviously are the defending champs. That's probably the Nets' hardest test. But the league sets up well for Philly. And I think Philly has to be the favorite. We just don't know for sure yet what's going to happen when, it's a 1-point game with a minute left. Who's going to get the ball? And the other concern is the health, because these guys have both gotten hurt in the past.
Drew, I talked a lot of baseball. You go for Philly.
This one, I think that obviously the 76ers are good, but, it's just too early to tell. You never know what'll happen in a couple of weeks. So, I guess we'll see how it plays out. But, the Bucks are still in there, of course, and red hot Bulls. You never know.
Who's your favorite, Drew?
Can't back off the Nets, right?
Are you saying this as a joke or just because it was your pick? Because the Nets are, talk about fading. I know Durant's hurt. Kyrie's missing some games. I know there's rumors that they'll allow him to play home games, etc. But do you generally still think the Nets are the favorite? Because the irony is that could be a first-round matchup. It could be Philly as the 1 or 2 seed against the Nets as, a 7 or 8.
Gotta talk to me in May. It's too early to tell. The NBA regular season. We're just dawdling along here, right?
That's true.
Give it another month or two.
Well, we did have like a 3 and a 2 seed in the NBA Finals this last year. Maybe it was even I can't remember. Were the Bucks a 4 or a 3? I think it was like a 2 and a 3. So
Bucks
we'll see.
3, I think.
Yeah, they were 3.
It went Philly, Brooklyn, and then Milwaukee. And I kind of find my position a little bit between the two of you guys. Like, Philly is certainly a very scary team right now. If we were to start the playoffs today, sure, I'd say that they're the favorite.
Sure.
But that's where I'm like lining up with Drew in terms of it is a little bit too early to get excited. It's kind of not necessarily incredible. Great talent always finds a way to play together. But it's really cool how Harden and Embiid have meshed so quickly, and it is because their games are so complementary to each other. You think about Harden in his Houston days. He always had like a good pick and roll big if you figure like Dwight Howard, Clint Capella, but Embiid can also pick and pop. Embiid can knock down a 17-footer. He can step back and knock down a 3-pointer, and just how dangerous that is. And especially when we consider, different eras. When was the last time that we had a truly dominant like guard and big man duo in the NBA that was going to contend for titles? Not necessarily a straight up duo because it was the big 3, but maybe like, that Ray Allen, Paul Pierce as like the perimeter guys, Kevin Garnett in the middle. Like, when was the last time that we had like that really, really good dynamic play between those two types of positions?
We sort of had that with LeBron and Davis. I know LeBron is considered a small forward, Davis a power forward, but LeBron is basically a point guard, if you're being honest.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess so. Like Davis to me doesn't strike me as like the same type of player of center as Joel Embiid. Like basically Anthony Davis is like a much longer guard in my estimation. Like his perimeter play is really, really good. I think that the key to Philly is going to actually be their surrounding pieces. Hanging on to Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle is absolutely outstanding on defense. Like they're going to need those guys to step up because Embiid and Harden can't play all the time. Like Drew said, there's still Milwaukee. We don't know, honestly, what Brooklyn's going to be. If we were to plug in, 2K, I would still really like Brooklyn, but Simmons hasn't been cleared for practice. I think that broke today. Steve Nash saying that Simmons isn't even back to being able to practice, let alone play. The Heat, they still seem to like overachieve. Like their roster doesn't seem super duper talented, yet they're sitting atop the East. You look at them matching up with Philly, Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler against Embiid and Harden. That would be a lot of fun to see come, late April, May, and June. So I think Philly is really, really scary right now. But once it gets to the playoffs, best of 7, these teams all healthy. Like, I don't know. It depends on matchup, I guess, is the best way to put it. If they match up against Chicago, Philly can, sail pretty well. But if they match up, something a little bit more difficult, we'll see.
Joel Embiid, by the way, has an insane record against the Bulls. I want to say he's like 10-0 and like completely dominates them.
Because he's like he's a true center, and that's something that the Bulls have not had in a
Sure.
long time. You know what I mean? So like his ability to just like physically dominate is like what separates him from say like an Anthony Davis type of player. I guess
Right.
is
And
like my biggest difference.
to sort of piggyback a little bit off what you're saying, first off, by the way, Embiid is trying to become the first center to lead the NBA in scoring since Shaquille O'Neal. And he's in
Ooh,
all
good pull.
honesty, Shaq is more dominant as far as how good he is in the post. And I don't think anyone is ever going to be as good as he was in the post, the sheer dominance in the post.
Mhm.
Embiid, though, obviously is a better shooter than Shaq, sort of like a little bit more refined big man. Although Shaq had extremely underrated moves in the post. That's something that was underrated about Shaq because he had the spins, the touchdown low, etc. But he obviously was not a pick and pop guy.
Mhm.
Embiid is and he could shoot free throws. A couple things, though, I will say this. Philly's supporting cast is not great. Tobias Harris is decent. I mean, he's a solid number 3, but they don't have very good. They don't have a very good bench. They don't have other great shooters. I know they obviously had to lose him in order to make this happen, but Seth Curry, I thought, was a big loss for them.
Absolutely.
He's a big shooter for them. So they don't have very good role players. That's why how healthy they are and how well they mesh in close games is huge because their role players are not very good. And we saw that. We've seen them lose some games this season by a lot when Embiid doesn't play or isn't on his game. When you mentioned the Heat, like you mentioned Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler, what do those guys do? They play pretty good defense.
Mhm.
So that would be obviously a tougher test. And Giannis, by the way, has also done very well against Embiid. If it's the Bucks, if there's a guy who can shut down and limit Embiid, it's Giannis. And so Drew Holiday, by the way, is a good defensive player too. So
Sure.
we'll see how those guys do against some of the tougher teams. I will say the Knicks are a pretty good defense, and they seem to have no issues with the Knicks. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I by no means am proclaiming them the hands down champion. There is a lot of question marks. It's obviously early, but we're doing hypotheticals here,
Mhm.
and just looking at their sheer talent and the sheer way that those two seem to mesh, I think it works for them. And I do think they are the favorite, but they're not like, I'm not betting my mortgage on them winning a ring anytime soon.
Keep an eye out for backup guard Furkan Korkmaz,
Okay.
Yeah,
just
nice.
because his name is Furkan Korkmaz. Sounds like a
And-
nice insult.
And
You
because he's
don't
good.
actually want to swear.
There you go. Interested to see what Doc Rivers does with those guys too. Doc Rivers did a great job of managing stars with Boston.
Mhm.
Then did not do it well in LA and had not had luck with it so far in Philly. So we'll see what happens in that situation as well. But definitely looking forward to it. Maybe along with last year, I'd say the NBA is about as open as we've seen in recent years. It felt like a lot of those years, it was basically the Warriors or LeBron is going to win the ring. Now we really generally don't know. I think there's probably 6 or 7 teams in any given series, given matchups, injuries, and how guys play. It's wide open. And like we said, like got some of those teams at the bottom, like the Lakers, the Nets. Those are dangerous teams at the bottom of the playoffs. So we'll see. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit, but
Mhm.
we'll definitely see what happens. Definitely looking forward to the NBA playoffs for sure.
Absolutely. We'll stay in the association. John Morant, Grizzlies, 52 points the other night after he scored 46 in his previous game. Is he the MVP comment, or who's the favorite right now?
Well, so he's number 5 according to the odds makers for MVP right now. He's at plus 1,200. He was plus 1,600 prior to the game last night. Embiid at plus 110 is the favorite. Jokic at plus 225 is second. Then Giannis at plus 550. Then DeRozan at plus 1,000. Then Ja plus 1,200. The same way I feel about like who's going to win this ring, it's the same way I feel about the MVP candidate. I think, first off, I'll say that this is going to go down to the very last game of the season. I think there's not a single guy that stands out. I think there's probably about 8 or 9 guys who are equally deserving. I mean, if you look at this from a statistics standpoint, which, I like to do, you look at DeMar DeRozan, even like Doncic and Trae Young, who are obviously not mentioned as MVP favorites because of how their team's doing. and then Ja Morant. These guys are averaging like nearly identical points per game. I mean, it's across the board. Their numbers are very similar. I got to give a lot of credit to Ja Morant for improving his three-point shot. He's not a great three-point shooter, but at 34, 35%, he's solid. He's no longer just an athlete. And like Shaquille O'Neal, who doesn't get enough credit for his moves, I think Ja has to get a lot of credit for his dribbling and sort of his craftiness, same way Luka is. Ja and Luka are both really good finishers around the rim, and that's a very underrated skill. So he's in the mix for sure. I mean, he's tied for 6th in the league in scoring. He's shooting over 50% from the floor. Between Jokic, Embiid, Ja, even, Curry, and then, Durant, LeBron, if they're healthy, Harden. I mean, all these guys to me are like neck and neck. I don't really think anyone really sticks out more above anyone else. I mean, I do think Embiid is going to win because I think the Sixers will end up with the 1 seed. He'll lead the league in scoring. He hasn't won MVP before, and that's a storyline. I know we get obsessed with team records, which I don't think we should when it comes to MVP. So that's what's going to hurt the Grizzlies, who are going to be, 3rd in the West, which is pretty good. But I don't see how a guy 3rd in the West is going to be the MVP. It'll be interesting to see whether he's first team all NBA as a guard. That'll be a little bit interesting as well, because obviously we have Curry, we have Doncic, we have Trae Young, all these guys, Chris Paul, James Harden. I mean, and I'm almost getting to statement of the week territory here. I'll tease that as well for later in the show. But the amount of incredible point guards we have in the NBA right now is crazy. And like the 6th best point guard is probably just as good as the 1st best point guard. I watch a lot of NBA, and I've actually done a good job of watching more of it lately. And I'd read up these stats, and it's like, let's be real. There's not a lot that separates any of these guys. Curry, Ja, Luka, even like a guy like Dame Lillard who's hurt, Chris Paul, James Harden. They're all like pretty similar. And like Durant and Giannis, LeBron, those guys are pretty similar in the small forward position. And Embiid and Jokic in the center position. There's not like a guy that stands out. I mean, I think LeBron and Curry are the faces of the NBA because of, LeBron's dunking and what he does off the court and his legacy, and Curry with his three-point shooting. But in terms of sheer skill, it's pretty bunched up in the NBA. DeMar DeRozan, another guy that's averaging about 28 a game. He's been the clutchest down the stretch. He's in the MVP race for the Bulls as well. So Ja right now is 5th best odds to win MVP. And I probably think that's pretty fair. I will say 46 and 52 back-to-back nights. That's pretty impressive. He did it on 22 of 30 from the floor, and he made all 4 of his threes. 22 of 30. Talk about accuracy. He had an insane dunk, an insane catch and shoot on the last second play, I think of the first half or whatever it was. So got to give him a lot of credit. He's definitely been knocking on that door of being a first-team All-NBA guy, a first-tier star. Tom and I, you talked about him wanting him to be in the dunk contest. I did, at least, for him to be a first-tier star. Maybe he doesn't even need the dunk contest. So hats off to Ja Morant. And I saw an interesting comparison on ESPN today. Ja Morant and Kevin Durant, very similar guys who were picked 2nd overall in the draft behind big forces of nature, Greg Oden and Zion Williamson. And it remains to be seen with Zion. When he has played, he's been great. But right now, it looks like Ja should have been the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, I mean, any time you can kind of come out of college averaging a double-double, because I think he had like right on the nose, like 10 assists per game at Murray State, and was, wildly popular team. It picked as like that 5-12 upset, if I remember correctly. I don't think he's going to win the MVP this year. I think that he is benefiting from being the star du jour, if you will. But when you look at stuff like player efficiency ratings, 1, 2, 3 is Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. And those are the 3 guys who are over, basically just sitting right around 32 player efficiency rating. Number 4 on the list is LeBron at 26. So for me, it's a 3-person race. I know we can talk about narrative as far as, the players ascending. I think Ja Morant will be an excellent MVP candidate next year when he has more of that profile. If he puts up similar numbers, then he's going to get it. I think right now it's really between those three guys. And I mean, obviously, no dissing on Ja Morant. I think he's wonderful. He's kind of like, once he improves on his shooting, once he picks up, 3, 4, 5 points on that 3-point percentage, he's going to be the basic perfect evolution of the point guard if you consider how it went from being a pass first position. And then you have guys come in like Allen Iverson, for example, who is a scoring first point guard. And then you add Derrick Rose and Russell Westbrook coming into the league right around the same time with that massive explosive athleticism and power to their game. And then Ja Morant kind of is just like combining all of that, because we saw the explosion, but we also see like great control. We see great passing. I'd say he's, pretty much, I think, a better passer. He's better court vision than, say, Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, Allen Iverson. So once he gets those shooting numbers up, and I think shooting's the easiest skill upon which to improve in the NBA. Like,
I don't know about that. Ask Ben Simmons.
Well, you can learn to shoot better than you can learn to pass better. You know what I mean? I mean, defense, that's more of like an effort thing. But I think like once he adds that to his game, at that point, Ja Morant will be an MVP candidate. So for me, I'm still down to those three guys, Embiid and Jokic and Giannis, for MVP. But Ja Morant is certainly a fantastic story for a fantastic team coming out of Memphis. A lot of people looking at them as a bit of a dark horse pick. We'll see where the season ends before we make any sort of finals predictions on that front. But certainly a fun team and a fun story so far.
Drew, what do you think about Ja Morant's MVP chances and just the MVP race? Who are you looking at?
I mean, it should definitely go to Jokic. The guy is incredible on Denver, and he's leading his team. I know they're not in first or second or whatever, but he's leading his team to near the top with guys. I mean, they're injured. Giannis, give a lot of credit to, and Embiid now has Harden, so we'll see what happens with his numbers in the long term here in the next couple of months. But yeah, I think Morant's a great story right now. We'll see if he can keep it up for a little more here.
And what's interesting about like what you guys are saying, and first off, there's only like 20 games left, like 20, 22, 23 games. So it's crazy like how close we are to the finish line. But you bring up Jokic.
I guess I forgot the playoffs are like 3 months long for the NBA. That's right.
Yes. Well, we're so used to them going deep into the summer because of COVID. The season actually started closer to regular time. So we're kind of more back on the regular NBA calendar. So I think the playoffs will wrap up in early June instead of July, which we've had the last few years, which is more of the reason for baseball to come back, because that's another reason why I didn't watch as much baseball the last few years. In July, I was watching NBA. But as far as what you said, Drew, it's very interesting because Jokic is having a better season than he did in his MVP season. And it's crazy because he's nearly averaging a triple-double. I think he's at 8 assists a game, and he's up there for most rebounds. So Embiid, I think, is getting more points than him. But Jokic is technically accounting for more total points if you add in his assists. One counter to your PER argument, Tom, I do notice that a lot of those guys are bigger guys. So it is maybe a little bit harder to get a higher PER as a guard.
Well, maybe a little bit, just to kind of go down the top 10 really quick. Like it goes Giannis, Jokic, Embiid. Then you've got LeBron, Durant. Morant's sitting at 6, so he's certainly in the conversation. Then Rudy Gobert, obviously defense and shot blocking plays a big role in that. And then you've got Trae Young at 8, Jimmy Butler at 9. So you're right. It does seem to skew a little bit more toward weighting rebounds, or maybe just block shots, that sort of defensive rating as well.
And also the field goal percentage. I know the bigger guys get in there a little more. I know that accounts for 3-point percentage too, but it's devil's advocate. It's not significantly.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But that's just my only point to PER. I mean, there was a lot of seasons where Jordan was highest in PER. You put up astronomical numbers, you'll be at the top. But I just think it's really funny to think about that right now, if we're being honest, Jokic is better than he was in his MVP season. Giannis is better than he was in his back-to-back MVP seasons. And quite frankly, they both might be better than Embiid, but Embiid's putting up a little bit more points because He is what's that word that you use to describe Mr. Morant?
The star du jour.
The star du jour of his team. There you go. Whatever. I mean, I can kind of guess what it means from context clues.
It's star of the day.
Star of the day. Star of the day. Star du jour.
At a French restaurant or something like that, the soup du jour is the term.
Okay.
So
well, here's the deal. We've got Jokic averaging 25.5 points, Embiid averaging 30 points, but Jokic gets 8 assists to Embiid's 4 assists, 4.5 assists, and Jokic is getting 13.8 rebounds. Holy cow. He's definitely killing. That's the second highest in the league. So those two are really, really interesting. I actually personally might like Jokic a little bit better just because of his great passing. I might be more on Drew's side. Obviously, Tom, you know me. I think that team record is overrated when it comes to the MVP race. I mean, as Drew said, who are Jokic's players on his team? He's playing with nobody. Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., the only 2 other basketball players on his team. Those guys have been hurt. I mean,
I want to say slam dunk contest runner-up Aaron Gordon.
Right. That's his best player right now, his best teammate. And Aaron Gordon, I believe, is a 0-time All-Star. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he is a 0-time All-Star. So that's just something to think about. I think the MVP race is very close. So Aaron Gordon, 14.6 points, is the 3rd leading scorer. Will Barton at 15.2, just barely ahead of him. But again, a 0-time All-Star. Monte Morris is the best guard on the team, and he's averaging about 13 points a game. So something to think about there. It's going to be really close. I definitely think Embiid is going to win it just because all those other guys in the race, the main guys, Giannis and Jokic, have won MVP before. Embiid hasn't. I know the league likes giving the MVP to a new guy, and Jokic is going to lose out on team record, which I vehemently disagree on, but that's just not how the cookie crumbles. That's not how the voters vote. And that's honestly going to hurt Ja as well with his team being 3rd in the West. So I'll tell you this, holy cow. All of a sudden, they're only 1 game back of the Warriors. So that's something to think about. And then DeMar DeRozan, hats off to him for being in the MVP race because he's been incredible in Chicago. He set a record that Will Chamberlain owned, most 35-point straight games, shooting 50% from the floor. And this is the beauty of the NBA right now. Even though Jokic and Embiid are revolutionary big guys, who are some of the other top MVP candidates? DeMar DeRozan and Ja Morant, Giannis Antetokounmpo. What do all 3 of those guys have in common? They're not great 3-point shooters, which shows you that you can be a great player and you don't even honestly, even Embiid and Jokic are solid 3-point shooters. You know, for big men, they're great, but they're not going to beat you from deep, lights out. So what's great about the NBA is you have the revolution of the 3-point game, but a lot of the top players in the league, like LeBron even, are not associated with 3-pointers. So that's really an interesting thing to think about. If you do something well, you know, keep doing it. People are obsessed with, you know, what's going to happen if Morant gets better at threes? What's going to happen if Giannis gets better at threes? You know what? They don't have to get better at threes. They're already amazing just the way they are. So I can't wait to see. I don't know who's going to win MVP. I don't know who should win MVP. I don't have a legitimate, concrete, for sure answer beyond the fact that I think it'll be Embiid. But I would lean maybe Jokic, but Jokic, Morant. I mean, all these guys are so close to me. I got to see the rest of the season before I decide. We'll leave it at that.
Meanwhile, Lakers are struggling. Common, should we be concerned?
Well, speaking of MVP candidates, obviously no one's talking about LeBron James, which obviously is because the record is bad. But have you guys seen what the record is in games he doesn't play? I mean, if he wasn't playing, these guys would be maybe a lottery team. I mean, they would be a lottery team, but they might be like a number 1 overall pick type team if he wasn't playing. LeBron is, by the way, averaging about 2 points more than his career average. This is his 4th highest scoring season of his career. He's shooting better from the field, the 3-point line, and the free throw line compared to the rest of his career. He's also getting more rebounds than in the rest of his career, a little bit less assists and that's only simply because the guys he passes to are bricking shots. I don't even think it's necessarily because LeBron isn't passing as much or passing as well. So that's a guy that I honestly think every year could be MVP and should be in the MVP race, regardless of what the team record is, because his value is unprecedented. Lakers are in trouble for sure because, as I predicted, Russell Westbrook is the most overrated athlete of all time. Once again, he's gone into a franchise and he's disrupted the offensive flow and the defensive flow. One of the Lakers' issues is that they were first in the league in defense last year. They're like 18th, 19th, 20th this year. So that's something that doesn't get talked about. Obviously, the Davis injuries hurt them, but they're designed around LeBron and Davis. And if one of those guys is hurt, they're in trouble. And even when Davis has played, he hasn't quite been the same. And then obviously, I spoke about Westbrook and how, what I think of him. And finally, more people are coming around to my side on this whole Westbrook debate over the years, which is great to see. And Tom, I talked about this last week. I mean, Austin Reeves is a guy that I think will start for them tonight. He's in on crunch time. He's a guy that I covered in Northeast Arkansas, Drew, Cedar Ridge High School. And obviously Malik Monk, literally he left Northeast Arkansas right when I started there. But I've seen him at the state championship game. Those guys are from humble roots in Arkansas. And obviously it's amazing to see what they're doing. But the fact that those guys are in at the end of the game when it's crunch time, that is worrisome for the Lakers. They have really, really bad role players. I mean, those are honestly probably like their fourth and fifth best players, if not third and fourth. And those guys are good if those are your best guys off the bench. But I don't want those to be my third and fourth best players. I mean, game on the line, Austin Reeves is throwing up the game-winning shot. I don't like that scenario. I mean, Carmelo is okay, but obviously Carmelo is well past his prime. So they're in trouble, but I'll say this. Last year when they lost in the playoffs, they were up 2-1 against the Suns, who made the finals in Game 4 with Anthony Davis on the court. They were leading in Game 4. Davis gets hurt. They lose Game 4 in the second half, and then they lose the next two games. And that was when LeBron was just coming off an injury. LeBron is much more equipped this season than he was last season to carry the team, and we've seen LeBron carry teams before. So they'll be in that play-in game. I think they'll win because of LeBron's experience, and then they play the Suns or Warriors. I mean, we've already seen this story before. LeBron single-handedly beating the Warriors almost against unprecedented odds. We've seen him put up a fight against the Suns last year when he was hurt. So I'd give him, honestly, a 45% chance to get an upset in that first round. They're a team that can lose the first round by 4 games or they can win the ring. LeBron James is a lot better than people realize and give him credit for right now. I think everyone is sort of on this train of LeBron is fading. He's past his prime. But I think he's like, I mean, if this is his prime, he's like right here. He's still really close to his prime. He's still throwing down dunks. He's shooting better than he ever has, and he's reinventing his game. I think his team is just really bad. I mean, Michael Jordan, early in his career when he played with bad players, what was happening? The Bulls were the 8th seed under 500, losing in the first round. This is a team game, and I think a lot of people are undervaluing LeBron, but in a 7-game series, it's still a lot to beat LeBron in a 7-game series. So I think the Lakers are they're like 8.5 games out of what would be the 6th seed. So they're not getting the 6th seed. I think they're 2.5 games ahead of whatever the 11th seed is. I don't think they're going to get the 11th seed. So I think they'll be in that 7, 10, 8, 9 game. And I think they'll win. Again, LeBron, 4th most points he's ever averaged, 29 a game, shooting 52% from the field, higher than his career average. I think he's great. I give him a shot. I give them a fighting shot, a little bit under 50% against the Warriors and Suns, who, by the way, are both dealing with injuries of their own at the moment.
I give the Lakers no shot.
No shot.
To win the first round. I don't even necessarily know that they make it out of the play-in tournament for those last 2 spots. I mean, looking at the injury report, I think most recent news is that as of, a couple weeks ago, we're still a couple weeks away from Anthony Davis being reevaluated for a mid-foot sprain, let alone knowing what that result is going to be and then having him practice and play and get back up to speed. I mean, if they get a healthy Anthony Davis back, obviously that changes everything. I'm kind of operating on the assumption that they're not going to have a fully healthy Anthony Davis because for the past 2 seasons, that's the fairest assumption to make when it comes to the Lakers. And yeah, LeBron is having an outstanding season as he always does. The problem, though, is that he's playing like 36, 37 minutes a game. He's playing way more minutes than I think in his mind he ideally would, because the whole point of the Lakers going all in and getting Russell Westbrook, which is something that quite frankly, LeBron James and Anthony Davis pushed for. They were the ones, at least according to reports that I'm reading, for people who cover the team beat writers, they said, hey, we want to have this guy on our team. And it hasn't paid off this season because he's like a full 5 PER off where he was last season. He was sitting right around 20. Now he's around like 14, 15. So he's playing much, much worse this year than he did last year. And the whole notion was, if we have 3 ball-dominant players, we can pair off throughout the game to give everybody a little bit more of a break. Because, you know, what's LeBron good at? Everything. Russell Westbrook also good at everything, not to the same level as LeBron James.
He
but
can't shoot.
He goes out there and he can get you points, he can get you rebounds, he can get you assists. He basically does he's a smaller, not as good version of LeBron James in terms of the role that he fills. So I think the fact
worse
that he's struggling, and then with Davis, you know, pretty much out, they had to give up a lot of depth to trade for first Anthony Davis a couple years back, and then trade the depth they'd replenished just to get Russell Westbrook. So I think they're in a situation where, you know, sure, they could win a playing game. They might win both of the playing games, but I don't see them pushing a series beyond 5-6 games at the very, very most.
Westbrook is way worse than LeBron.
I'm saying
is always
like
LeBron is like a 50% field goal percentage guy, 51%. Westbrook's like 42%. I just but anyways, go ahead, Drew.
I mean, it's very generous that you have the Lakers making the play-in game. They still have some work to do, as you have the Pelicans who beat them the other night, and then the Spurs have the capability, I think, to pass the Lakers. They may be on the outside looking in the next month.
I could see that.
I don't think so. I think LeBron will get things together. I think they obviously aren't going to have a great record, but there's something about playoff LeBron, and there's something about when he gets it going. They're not very far away, by the way. If you look at a lot of their losses lately, in their last 6 losses, they've had 4 by 5 points or less. They've had a couple that are 2-point losses, 1-point loss, 3-point loss. I mean, they're literally a possession away. If Anthony Davis, granted he's not the player he was, but if Anthony Davis is playing in those games, I'd say Anthony Davis is worth a possession. So instead of being 3-6 in the last 9 games, they'd probably be 6-3 if they have Davis. So keep that in mind. Even if he comes back and he's not near 100%, a lot of these games they're losing just barely, they'll be winning just barely. And that's something to keep in mind too. If he can get back to relative health, he's going to be fresher. That's something else to keep in mind about James Harden also. The Sixers in the last argument we had, he's going to be fresher. And there's something to be said about being fresh come playoff time. So it could be a sort of a silver lining. Because, I mean, the thing with the Lakers and LeBron James, they don't need home court. They are veteran players. They can win on the road. They can get it done on the road. It doesn't mean that much. And for LeBron, it's championship or bust. So you're going to have to go through the Warriors, Suns, whatever, regardless anyways. So for him, it doesn't matter if he plays them in the first round or if he plays them in the conference finals. I mean, you know he's going to get more hate. He's going to get hate regardless, whatever round he loses in. So I think he'll be fine. I look for the Lakers to make some noise. I mean, they still might lose in that first round series, but I don't think it's going to be a walkover by any means.
There you go. We'll move on to, what are we moving on to? March Madness right around the corner. Conference tournaments starting up this week. The smaller ones are getting going. Yes, of course. I know you guys will definitely be in that. Guys, what do you think about the smaller conferences? Do you have any kind of sleeper teams that could make some noise in the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I talked a lot. I'll let Tom go first, but I do want to say this. Get your Excel picks in, guys. I know we have a little Excel
Mhm.
sheet amongst us. Doesn't it start like tonight or something, Drew? We got to get those picks in.
I go by the Jerome deadlines, you know that, and they're due
Okay.
tomorrow at noon.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, tomorrow at noon, I expect to see the Excel sheet. I sent mine in nice and early. Tom,
Mhm.
what do you think about this question? I'll let you talk because I talked a whole bunch.
Yeah, so I think that it's interesting that we have so many smaller teams that I think can be pretty good. As far like I'm not sure like where exactly we're starting. I'm just going like non Power Five type thing.
Sure.
I don't know. Like I think St. Mary's they've proven with their win over Gonzaga this past weekend that they're a fairly legitimate team. I mean, if we're not counting Gonzaga because they're Gonzaga, I'm not
Sure.
sure if it's fair to count St. Mary's because they're playing in the same conference. But I mean, one team I'm pretty excited about, Murray State. We were talking about with John Morant a little bit earlier, and what I like about Murray State is that they kind of have this classic March Madness combo where you've got one big and two guards that are
Yep.
like your big three. Because as you get into the tournament, depth is important if you have an injury, but if you're losing one of your top couple players, it doesn't matter what kind of depth you have. I mean, like these are college kids. There is a big stratification just on the roster itself. If you look at KJ Williams at forward and then Justice Hill and Tevin Brown at guards, the other thing that I really like about the Murray State Racers, their top 6 minutes guys are right at or above 70% free throw shooting. I think most of them are like 75% and up, and then one guy's at like 69.7. So that's going to be really key because as it gets down to crunch time, free throws are going to be really important. That's a way where you don't want to be giving away points at any point in the game, let alone late when the pressure is on. So I really like Murray State. Um, Belmont and Loyola are a couple of mid-major darlings that I always tend to go for. And then I've got a couple others that I'll mention really briefly. I like North Texas, the Mean Green, potentially. We saw them upsetting Purdue last year. They play really good defense, could be sneaky good again. And then keep an eye out for Dayton as well. I need to do more research, but they play at a really, really slow pace. But they're good enough on offense and defense that with that slow pace, fewer possessions, more variance, the better team doesn't have as many opportunities to demonstrate that fact. I like the Dayton Flyers as well. So there's a couple of ones. Hopefully I didn't take like too many off your guys' board. Hopefully we don't have that much overlap.
No, actually, we surprisingly don't have that much overlap. We have one major overlap, but it's kind of the no duh pick. I mean, I got Murray State written down as well. They're 28-2, alma mater of John Morant, 18-0 in the Ohio Valley. Two losses all year. One was at ETSU, which was kind of their one bad game. You get a bad game. And their other loss was at Auburn. And Auburn was ranked, number 2 in the country recently. And they're still like
they were one at some point, right?
Maybe they were number 1. So I mean, they're still in like the top 15 in the country. Really good Auburn basketball team. So that's one of your only losses. I mean, that's really, really good. Auburn is ranked 5th in the country right now. So that's at Auburn. That's not a bad loss for Murray State. Kind of reminds me of Davidson back in the Steph Curry time when they made it to the Elite 8. They were like undefeated in conference. They had 4 losses in the non-con. It was like against number 1 UNC. They lost to like Duke in Kentucky or something. Don't quote me on that, but they had like 4 blue blood losses. And Murray State has played a lot of really good teams, and they have played some good teams in non-con, at least Auburn, in their one loss. And by the way, KJ Williams, 18 points, 9 rebounds, shooting efficiently. Tevin Brown's really good at guard. So I want to see them play. I mean, I'll be honest. I told you this, Tom. Over the years, I've watched a lot of college basketball. I have not watched as much this year. Hardly. I actually watched a little bit this weekend. I caught some of the Baylor-Kansas game. Great second half for the Baylor Bears. Inspired me to bet on a Monday. Got that one right. So go Bears. But haven't watched as much, and I think I'm going to actually sit down and watch quite a lot of conference tournament weekend. Actually, the following weekend, my girlfriend is out of town for her friend's birthday, So I literally, like, I'm off Saturday. I work Friday and Sunday. Sunday, I work a lot. Friday, a little bit shorter work day. So I'll watch some on Friday, but I'm actually dedicating Saturday to conference tournament hoops.
There you
So
go.
I'll be keeping an eye on all of that. Want to see Murray State play, like not necessarily in person, but I'll definitely pop their tournament on. That'll be one I'm watching. I really want to see Liberty. Liberty in the Atlantic Sun tournament, because I'm a big fan of scores, efficiency. Well, Darius McGee at Liberty, second in the nation at 24.7 points per game, shooting 46% from the floor, 40% from three, 88.4 from the line. A star player can carry a team. We've seen that in the past. I know we had Amos on Oral Roberts, I think it was last year.
Mm-hmm.
We had Steph Curry a few years back. So look out for those mid-major darlings with star players that can get hot and carry them. So keep an eye out on Liberty and the Atlantic Sun. And then this one is sort of like your St. Mary's pick. I don't know if we can really even count them, but I want to see what Houston's going to do. They're a Final Four team last year, 14th in the nation this year at 24-4. A lot of balance on offense. They're a great rebounding team. Got to see what they've learned from last year's tournament experience. I mean, a Final Four run should give them confidence. Shooting was kind of their one issue last year, or at least relatively speaking to the elite teams. So I want to see what they do. I'll have a little bit more in terms of other stuff I'm watching, but there's something else that I'm keeping an eye out on this conference tournament week. But before I get to that, Drew, what do you think? I know you're big in the college hoops. What are your little things you'll be looking, little fun tidbits and fun teams you want to let us know about?
A lot of East Coast bias out there. I know you guys mentioned St. Mary's, but Mountain West, they're going to get 3 or 4 teams in. Yeah. Boise, CSU, Wyoming, San Diego State. And those will be fun to pick those teams. And it doesn't matter who wins. They'll probably get 3 or 4 in the tournament. And then, yeah, you do mention St. Mary's. They are a good squad. I had another West Coast team. San Francisco, if they're able to make it into the NCAA tournament, watch out for the Dons. They're much improved from previous years. And, they've kept up with Gonzaga and St. Mary's.
Yeah, I actually have the thing I wanted to talk about that I just hinted at was the Mountain West. I did watch a Mountain West game a little while back, and I was pretty impressed. Scott Van Pelt on ESPN is actually impressed with the Mountain West. You mentioned those 4 teams. Boise State, Colorado State, Wyoming, and San Diego State are all really good teams. Look for the first 3 to make it. San Diego State may need an impressive conference tournament showing, which is ironic because I believe that's where Kawhi Leonard played, and San Diego State has sort of been a staple in March Madness in recent years. Actually, ironically, they've been a higher seed and not done great in some seasons, but that's a really, really good basketball program. So I actually would like to tune on the Mountain West and see what those 4 teams are all about. I mean, UNLV, another Mountain West team, I believe they're in like 5th in that conference, but I want to see if that conference is for real, because the one game I did watch, it seemed like quality basketball. And from what I've seen and read, the Mountain West is kind of that conference, the non-Power 5 conference that you got to keep your eyes on, because they have, like Drew mentioned, they have 4 teams who all could potentially win their first round games in March Madness, could potentially make a run and do something special. So the Mountain West tournament will be one that I'm keeping my eyes on. Obviously, we'd like to see what happens with Loyola now that they have a new coach. I know you love their old coach so much, Tom. Loyola is on the bubble, so it'd be crazy. It's crazy if you think about what Loyola's done the last few years. Like, if they don't win their conference tournament, like what happens there. And the other reason why I'm interested in the Missouri Valley is I want to see Missouri State, man. Has 2 kids I covered when I worked in Missouri, 2 state championship players for the Rockbridge Bruin. Isaiah Mosley, he's like one of the leading scorers in the country, quite honestly. He's over 20 points a game, playing very good basketball. Jamonta Black, his former high school teammate on that team as well. So obviously, as kids I covered and interviewed, I am interested in them. And their other high school teammate, by the way, plays on the team we don't like, DeJuan Harris at Kansas. My goodness. DeJuan Harris was not even that highly recruited and somehow ended up at Kansas, which is crazy to think about because we have these two kids, the star player on Missouri State, the starting point guard on Kansas, and another starter on Missouri State. Kids less than 10 minutes away from Mizzou Arena. I used to make that trip covering Rockbridge hoops, going over to cover Mizzou hoops. And given how bad Mizzou's playing, how do we not have all three of these guys on the team? I mean, what are we doing, Mizzou? What are we doing? So interested in seeing those high school kids from Rockbridge High School and how they do in their conference tournaments. Expecting big things from them for sure. So it'll be a fun week. I know we say this every year, but and maybe we said this last year, but maybe we didn't, because I felt like last year on this show at least, and maybe on many shows across the country, the consensus was Baylor and Gonzaga are top dogs, and then we got everybody else behind them. And that's what the national title game was. This year, I don't really think there's a top dog. I mean, Gonzaga has been beat. We just saw them get beat against St. Mary's. They're 24-3. Arizona's 25-3. I mean, we've got Baylor with 5 losses, Duke with 4, Auburn with 4, Kansas with 5, Kentucky with 6, Purdue with 5. I mean, I don't think there's a single team in the country that, has been even close to undefeated. I think Murray State with those 2 losses in a weak conference, undefeated in conference, is the closest thing we have to an undefeated team. All these Power 5 teams, have 3, 4, 5 losses, if not more, and we still got time left. So I think it'll be fun because I think it's going to be pretty open, even more so than years past.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Any other stories or bubble teams? I guess we kind of covered that. Should we move on to the NFL?
Yeah, we can move on. The biggest one I had written down myself is, and we both hit on it, was the Mountain West. I think that's a conference tournament that we should watch if you're looking for a conference that has potentially more than one team that can make a run. The Mountain West would be the one to watch.
Absolutely. Well, moving on to the NFL, Kyler Murray's been in the news. The NFL Combine starting up today, ending next Monday. How important is the Combine, Common?
So you already know where I stand on this, but I feel like we revisit this.
I don't remember.
Okay, of course you don't. You're getting older these days, Drew
I'm assuming
Brackett.
It doesn't matter, but...
Yes. So I do want to preface this by saying we want to acknowledge that the NFL Combine's going on. Obviously, the most popular sport in America. We'll do a little short recap on it last week. We are recording on a Tuesday. Combine getting underway today. It's ending next Monday. So the following show the next day is the best time to sort of recap it. So at the time of recording, we haven't really seen what's going to happen. But I mean, personally, I'm not a fan of the Combine. I think that it is just something that guys are never asked to do in a game, because even these 40 times, they're running without pads. They're running in a straight line without pads. I mean, that's something that you don't do in games. Even the cone drills, the jumping drills, the lifting, I mean, all of it is without pads. You know that in NFL football, one of the most important things you can do is how quick are you in little spaces? How do you do a route? How do you cut in? I mean, Jerry Rice is the best route runner. Emmitt Smith had incredible vision. I mean, Emmitt Smith led all-time leading rusher in NFL history. Jerry Rice, all-time leading receiver. Neither of those guys put up great combine numbers. I mean, Tom Brady, what did he do at the combine? He's the all-time leader in just about all the stats. So I think it's sort of overvalued. And I'd say this, even for the guys that do run really fast, a lot of those guys that clock in really fast 40 times, most of them clock in really fast 40 times in college games on the field as well. So it's very rarely do we learn something new. I do think some teams look at those measurables, and I do think certain teams do put a certain sort of importance on it, maybe too much importance. So I think it probably matters more to teams than it matters to me. I can guarantee you'll talk about this, Tom, so I'll mention it because I know you'll be talking about it, and I can confirm my suspicions. The Combine is also used as an opportunity to get to know and interview players, which is also important, but you can also do that in a non-Combine setting as well. So I'm not the biggest fan of the NFL Combine. Obviously, that resulted in a guy like Blaine Gabbert, a Mizzou guy that we knew, And sorority girls at Mizzou at the football games were calling Blaine Gabbert out. Sorority girls at Mizzou could have told you he wasn't going to pan out at quarterback. I mean, what are we doing with these quarterbacks? They're throwing the ball 50 yards down the field with no pressure in their face. There's a lot of guys
Blaine's
who have
still in the league.
He's a Super Bowl champion with the Bucs.
He's making money. I think he's doing just fine.
He's doing just fine.
You can call out so many other college quarterbacks.
He was like 9th or 10th overall pick, though. I mean, if you're drafted that high, you expect to be a starter. Quite frankly, like, he was one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the NFL over the last 10 years.
That might be just part of the Jacksonville program.
Well, that too. That didn't help him, but I don't think Blaine has done well enough. And that's my point, though. Like, Jamarcus Russell would be an even better example. Jamarcus Russell has been even worse. I mean, he was throwing the ball 75 yards with his foot on the ground. When are you ever going to do that in the NFL? You're down if your foot's on the ground, buddy. So, like, you look at what these quarterbacks are being tested on, like, you got to be able to pass the ball with defenders in your face. It's just a different skill set. So it is not necessarily awful to get certain measurables, certain numbers, but I personally don't put a lot of stock in them. And I do think the combine is definitely overrated for sure.
I think the combine is pretty important. I mean, it's one of those things where if you are using it in place of actual game footage, actual talent evaluation, that's where you're going to get into a lot of trouble. I think that the reason they do a lot of these drills is because it's less so now than it used to be, but there is a difference between a pro level game and the college level game and what players are asked to do. So when they're doing stuff like the cone drills, when they're doing the shuffle drills, all that stuff, it's basically saying, okay, we're going to see what traits you have that might not show up on a game tape because if you're a guard, you weren't asked to pull out on some sort of block, if you weren't told to run certain routes as a receiver. We want to test these things, and the combine's just like the biggest place where you can just aggregate all this talent. The interviews, as you mentioned, are really important as well, but what I've heard is the most important thing, it's the medicals. It's all the teams being able to get their entire staffs in and get their hands in medical expertise on as many players as possible, so that when they have a note from a scout saying, oh yeah, they had like a bad knee at some point or an ankle, the doctors can go in and check to make sure, okay, is this going to be a recurring thing? I know that was for, I want to say, is it Jonathan Allen on the Washington now Commanders? Like, he had a knee issue that actually caused him to drop because the medicals at the combine determined that this was going to be a long-term issue. So he's going to be good for like a couple, for the first however many years of his career, but eventually this is going to be something that's going to cost him where he can't be necessarily a cornerstone player. So the combine's like important simply from like a wholesale perspective, if that makes sense. Like you go to Costco to get like all the toilet paper that you could ever need. You go to the combine to talk to as many players as you possibly can because they're all there. So that's the importance. If like you said, Common, if they're actually using 40 times to determine if someone's going to be good, that's really like the overrated part. I think a lot of that's just so they can kind of like have a production, have people watch and get money off the combine, if I had to guess.
Sure.
So it serves its role in varying measures.
And to be fair, I'm not in those general manager rooms, and a lot of the combine stuff might be, media and fan created hype because they need to have measurables on guys that we just don't know about. So I don't know for sure that teams do make it that important, as long as it's considered significantly, and I do mean significantly less important than what they did on the field.
Absolutely.
Then I can understand it. But my point in like those physicals and interviews you mentioned, like, that could be done. Like when people think of the combine, they think of the drills and all that. And some of those drills for certain positions, I'd say they do matter a little bit. They do test some skills. Your point's not completely wrong. But I do think certain things like the 40 time and the quarterbacks throwing the ball, et cetera, those are obviously very different than what they would do in a game. Like a 40 time on an offensive lineman. I mean, like, why are we even timing their 40 time? How long, when is a guy, I know guys are asked to block down the field, but I don't see offensive linemen ever being asked to sprint down the field. That's just a very different skill.
Dallas could have used some better sprinting linemen in the playoffs.
That's true. If the clock is running out. So, yeah, I mean, I can see your point, and it's not. I can see some merits of it, and I do think the biggest reason the combine exists is getting all those guys in the same room, and so the NFL can make money and have a little bit more time to talk about stuff in March. What do you think about the combine, Drew?
I mean, I think you need to, if you're a team and you're investing millions of dollars into a player, you want to evaluate them, and that's what this is for. It is NFL wants to make money off of it, so they do throw it on TV, and you can buy tickets to it, I'm sure. So it's kind of blown out of proportion in that manner, but it is important to teams. I don't think it's necessarily important for the public.
Okay, interesting. A couple other things just want to hit on real fast about the NFL, things that are going on in the offseason. I don't know that we need to talk about this too much, but I do want to mention this for our listeners. Dak Prescott did have shoulder surgery today. I think you said, Tom, on his non-throwing shoulder. Just something he wanted to clean up. So all indications are that he's going to be okay, but the only reason that's worth mentioning is because he's dealt with a lot of injuries in previous off seasons. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with Dak. Perhaps the more interesting thing, and you guys could weigh in on Dak if you want, but the more interesting thing is the whole Kyler Murray saga. Like, is he, he's deleting photos of the Cardinals on Instagram. His agent and him have said they're not really supportive, but then he says he wants to win with the Cardinals, and like he is a little bit under 500 as a starter there. He's like the only quarterback ever with like 70 touchdown passes and 20 rushing touchdowns in the first 3 seasons of his career. But at the same time, he's dealt with turnovers, accuracy issues, has not been very clutch down the stretch and in the playoffs. So sort of like Kyler Murray is like a very, very bipolar player. He's a guy that like early in the season, we're ready to throw him in the MVP race, and come the end, it's like you don't want to have anything to do with him. So, I mean, if you're the Cardinals, here's the question, Tom. Here's the question, because he has, I believe, 1 year left on his contract this next year, and the drama is whether they're gonna give him an extra year, re-sign him, whatever it is they want to do, whether they're going to commit to him long term. Do you think that he's worth a long-term commitment? And what do you think about all this drama, Drew and Tom?
Yeah, I think he's worth a long-term commitment because, I mean, like the base level talent is there. And like, yeah, I mean, not every quarterback is going to be like a Patrick Mahomes level quarterback, but that doesn't mean that they're not good quarterbacks or can become better than what they currently are. I think that, like, what else is Arizona going to do? Like, are they going to like try to trade him, get picks, restart at the whole quarterback position? It's really, really hard. We're finding to get a good quarterback on your team, and I think that he's definitely in a different echelon from the conversation of, say, like what happened with Ryan Tannehill in Miami, what's currently happening with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland, where it's like, okay, I think that's a little bit more of a legitimate conversation about, is Baker Mayfield the guy? I think Kyler Murray can absolutely be the guy for Arizona. It's just a matter of, how they're going to put talent around him for him to utilize on offense, but then also complement him on defense. That's going to be the big thing. And then, yeah, I think it probably just kind of comes down to money as far as like him wanting to lock up that security, because he knows like he's a smaller player who's also like a running quarterback and is more likely to get injured because he is, there are so many more motion vectors going on when he's playing. Then, Tom Brady's not taking off and running down the field, 40, 50, 60 yards type of thing, and putting himself at risk for a hit on that sort of scenario. So I think that's probably why Kyler Murray is coming out and being upset. I don't know exactly what has him upset, if it's, something that he feels is a perceived slight in the media or something like that. I don't know in how he's being covered. But I absolutely think that he can be a win-with quarterback for Arizona.
I don't know why he decided to go public with all of it, but
that's the other thing.
I don't know why you do that to your team and to your GM and everybody, but
to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think Obviously, if you're Arizona, you don't like that he did this, but I don't know if it necessarily gives him more leverage. Maybe. I don't know. It would just probably make the GM or owner mad and be like, well, what are you doing, man? Do you want a contract? So I don't know. I would definitely want him as my quarterback, though, long term. So I guess we'll see what the Cardinals end up doing.
Yeah, I would say for them, I think it would be good for them to give him a short-term extension. I don't know if he's the long-term guy. My best guess is that they're not going to get someone better, like as Tom was mentioning.
Mhm.
But at the same time, though, we keep waiting for him to take a step forward, and it seems like he's like one step forward, one step back sort of guy. So I think I land somewhere in the middle of that because I do agree, Tom, that he has the baseline talent to be great. However, I really haven't seen him show consistency. And there's a lot of guys who have base talent to be great, like Derek Carr with the Raiders, by the way. Derek Carr can be great, but he also has been inconsistent. So you just don't know which Derek Carr you're going to get. I don't think you know which Kyler Murray you're going to get. So I would say I would still be cautious if I'm them. I would say more likely than not, he is worth a short-term investment. More likely than not, you won't get a better guy because, as you mentioned, Tom, it is hard to start over at the quarterback position. But Kyler Murray, like, there's just something off about how he's played down the stretch. I know I talked about this on our show last year. And a lot of the bigger games against the bigger teams, he had really bad turnovers. It's not like he's, per se, a turnover machine constantly, but he's a turnover machine in the wrong moments. And he was turning the ball over inside his own team's 20 and in the red zone. Literally the worst times to turn the ball over. So I would say I think they should give him a little bit of a chance, but I don't think that's a guy that I want to sign to a 6-7 year extension. Like whatever, 1 year left on his contract, maybe you want to give him 2 more years. But I would be a little bit cautious here. I would not be wanting to be offering him a 10-year deal or be willing to give him Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Dak, even quite frankly, even Dak Prescott money, because I don't think he's worth as much as those guys. And that's kind of my guess. Again, we're just guessing. I don't know. So don't quote me on this. I could be entirely wrong, but my guess is that he wants the big quarterback money and the long-term quarterback contracts that a guy like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen have gotten. But guess what? Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are putting up better numbers than you. They're putting up more wins. They're actually out there dominating in the playoffs. Like they have off games once in a while because they're human beings, but they've overall been consistently great in the regular season and in the playoffs. I believe top 2 all-time in playoff passer rating, for sure top 3 or 4. And Kyler Murray hasn't done that yet. So he doesn't deserve the Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen money. And that's that might be the issue there is my guess. So that should be good on that, though. What's next, Drew?
We got locks?
Locks of the week. Locks of the week. All right. Let's see. Locks of the week. All right. I actually forgot to send myself the recap. 1 second. Let me pull this up. I know I emailed it to myself and I forgot to copy and paste it. But we're down to 3 locks of the week now instead of 5. I think we had a solid week last week. 1 second. Tom, you probably know what our week was. Let me pull it up here. Our locks of the week, locks info. I think I was 1-1-1. What were you, Tom?
I was 2-1. So I had the Nuggets -4.5 over the Kings that connected last Thursday. Warriors -6.5 at Portland connected. That number ended up being like a -11 by game time. So Common, that was another one that you had as well. So we jumped on that at just the right time. Grizzlies -2.
Go ahead.
And then the last one I had was Grizzlies -2 over the Timberwolves. That one ended up missing. I think T-Wolves won by 7, I want to say.
Yeah, Tom, you were 2-1. I was 1-1-1. I had Ajax to win. Oh, you know what? I was 1-2. I lied. I had Ajax to win at Benfica. So I was 1-2. I missed that one. Or I was 1-1-1 because I had the Bulls -4 and they won by 4. Ironically, I got them at -3 later in the night, got that win. So got a wash on our show. Then I had the Warriors covering against the Blazers. They covered 132.95. Drew went with some ATP Dubai tennis. You had Karen Khachanov over 21.5 games. I got it pulled up here on the phone. 22 games total, 6-3, 7-6. Talk about just barely getting it, Drew. You got it by 1 game. You had Napoli, Barcelona under 2.5 goals. That was wrong. 4-2 Barcelona winning big time. The boys are back. Xavi's doing big things for Barcelona. Messi's out there assisting Mbappe for PSG. They are looking good. And then you had Southampton, Norwich City under 2.5 goals. It was correct. 2-0 Southampton. My worry, Tom, was that Norwich's defense wouldn't hold up. But they did hold up at least well enough. They allowed 2 goals. They couldn't score on offense. Tom, yeah, you were right. You got that Warriors pick right. You missed the Grizzlies pick. And you got the Nuggets over the Kings. So Drew is in first place, 58, 44, and 2 on the season. Well ahead of the pack. Maybe not as much on Tom, but still well ahead of the pack, Drew. You've been the resident expert here. What are your expertise this week? I mean, literally one of the best records in the world in sports betting at the moment. Drew Brackett.
How about that? Well, we'll go to the NHL. Blues Rangers tomorrow. I'll go under 5.5 goals in that contest. And then tomorrow, the 2nd of March, the FA Cup, Southampton versus West Ham United, under 2.5 goals in that match. And then on the 5th of March, there's an EPL game. I guess that's Saturday. Burnley and Chelsea under 2.5 as well.
All right, those EPL unders are good for you. You know what I did this week, Drew? My girlfriend's brother recently has gotten into sports betting. As you can probably guess, he's not doing great, as most sports bettors don't do. I told her that he should watch our show, not listen to mine or Tom's picks. I said he should listen to your picks because you are the expert. Those ESPN guys doing their betting shows that are under 500 this season. Well, Drew, you're 14 games over. So my advice to my girlfriend was throwing darts, was to listen to you. I told her this, and this is how I feel about sports betting as a whole. When I first started betting years ago as a kid, I was betting kids in middle school and high school and cleaning them out. Sports mattered a lot more. Statistics mattered a lot more back in the day. These days, with all the upsets, stats simply do not matter as much. Betting is harder than ever to predict, but there is one person who's predicting it better than anyone else I know. I started reading Action, by the way. I don't know if you've heard of the Action betting guys. They're very bad at NBA. Ironically, really good at college basketball predictions. So those guys are doing well. But I've recently just gotten into tracking and betting and seeing accuracy and everything. And a lot of these betting experts that write and do it for a living, they are right around 500, most of them. And as you guys know, like some are above, some are below. If you win half of your bets when you're paying juice, you lose money. That's why an estimated 85% of sports bettors are losing money. But the one guy that I would say is most reliable in the sports betting industry is Drew Brackett at the moment. So
wow. I think we need to record this, and then maybe I need to create an NFT and that's the last 5 minutes of this show and see how much it goes for here. Or I just create the digital NFT and hang a placard on the wall.
These are great ideas.
Never been praised by Common before in my life. Wow.
It's a first. There's a first time for everything. Man, when you're 14 games over 500 on locks of the week, there's praise to be given out. 14 games over 500. That is unprecedented territory. All right. Well, hey, here are my picks. Hopefully I go 3-0. I at the very least, I'm not going over. I feel a winning week this week. So I like the Lakers plus 5.5 against the Mavericks. Yeah, Lakers are struggling, but in their last 9 games, guess what, guys? They have 3 wins, but 4 of their 6 losses have come by 5 points or less. 4 of them by 3 or less. They've got 2 by 2 points, 1 by 1 point. So 7 of 9 games, they've covered that line. Lakers are much better at home this year at 18-15 compared to 9-18 on the road. They're at home here. Mavs have been worse on the road, 16-14 compared to 20-11 at home. Lakers even won at Dallas earlier this season. So give me the Lakers to cover 5.5 points. Then I'm rolling with the Warriors minus 1.5 at the Timberwolves. No Draymond and Clay, but you know what? They've learned a lot without these guys all year. I know they blew that big lead against the Mavs. I think the Warriors bounce back here. I think Steph Curry has a big game. I think Jordan Poole has a big game, a guy who struggled a little bit lately. Look for hot shooting nights from those guys. Give me the Warriors to win. I mean, 2 points is not a lot. Like basically, they're very unlikely to win by 1, which, by the way, knowing my luck, that's exactly what will happen. But it comes down to it. If you think the Warriors are going to win at minus 1.5, might as well bet it. I know it's a road game. I know they have injuries, but anytime I hear Warriors Timberwolves, granted an improved Timberwolves team, but I'll take my chances with the Warriors winning the game. And then finally, I'm going to go to some bad basketball here. This has not worked out well in the past, but I'm going to hope for some more bad basketball. Rockets and Clippers under 227.5 points. That is a whole lot of points in a game for 2 teams that played just 2 days ago. 99-98 2 days ago. Yeah, it'll probably be higher scoring, but my goodness. Is there going to be 31 points more? I doubt it. I know the Rockets are maybe the worst team in the league on defense, but neither of these teams are very good on offense. I mean, there's no star power here. There's no overrated, even Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are playing out there. I mean, there's not superstars on either of these teams. So how are they going to get to 228 points? The only way that's going to happen is if it goes to overtime and they get barbecued. But I'm banking on no overtime here in a 3-0 week. Maybe I can be more like Drew Brackett. You know that song, Gotta Be Like Mike, Gotta Be Like Drew. It's Wanna Be Like Mike, I think. So
yeah, I think it's Wanna Be. So yeah, I think once again, you and I will be sharing a Warriors bet. I like Golden State as well. I had it at -3, so you have it at -2.
Yeah, I had it at -1.5, but let me see what the updated line is.
I'll take an extra 1.5 if I can get it. Bovada has it at 3.
Oh, okay. Well, I see it at 3 as well. Okay, well, that changes things, but I'll go -3. That's fair.
So we're sticking -3 then.
Well, let me see. I have this app that shows you the best available bet for it. I see the best available at, wow, -3, really?
I saw it at 1.5 earlier. I checked it. It's 3 as far as I can tell. So
I wonder why that's moved so much.
I don't know. Probably somebody's like out or something along those lines.
Well, I'll go with -3. I'm good with that.
I didn't see Anthony Edwards on the PRA, on the player props, so maybe that's why.
Okay.
Another game, I'll go college basketball. Not necessarily a huge fan of going amateur, but I'll go Purdue -3 at Wisconsin. Wisconsin is winning despite the fact that I don't think they're that particularly good of a team. And then, burn me once, shame on me. Or no, shame on you.
Come on,
Burn
George
me twice,
W.
shame on me. I'm going Spencer Dinwiddie over 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists for the Dallas Mavericks and the Lakers. Debated going to straight up Mavericks on the line, but I'll go with a PRA on that one.
Oh man, I can already tell you're going to lose that one. He did you dirty last time, man. He did you dirty.
It was the first game. Like the first 2 games, I looked at the numbers. It's the smallest of sample sizes. The first 2 games under his PRA, but he's put up 20 points and 22 points in his past couple of games. So if he just does that again,
okay.
So yeah, Dinwiddie and the Mavericks.
Looking forward to that for sure. I mean, that's the That's the TNT game that I might watch. I think it's 9 o'clock tonight, Tuesday night. So I'll be looking out for that one at 9 o'clock.
I'll be keeping tabs.
I was eyeing, what's the score of the Providence Villanova game right now, Drew? Can you pull up the score? I didn't end up placing
Nova
any bets.
up by 14 at half.
Who's up by 14?
Nova.
Okay, all right, good deal. All right, good. No bets were placed. Good, because I was eyeing that game. I think I would have been on the wrong side of that one. Providence, very good in close basketball games. Come March Madness, keep your eye out on Providence. They just don't match up well against Villanova. They lost to them last time out. But yeah, locks of the week will be fun. I'm predicting, let's see. So I don't know. Tom and I go through these stretches. I think when we first started picking the same games, we were doing pretty bad. Then we were doing pretty good. And of late, we haven't done as good. So, I mean, I'm guessing we're probably roughly 500 when we make the same picks. But I would say I probably prefer to be on that side now. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. But we'll see. What else do we have? Sports trivia, right?
Yeah, what you got?
Do you guys have a sports trivia?
I do.
All right, let's start with Tom. With Tom.
So no particular reason, just something that I heard that was kind of funny. So in the NBA, Luka Doncic currently leads the league with 13 technical fouls. Who is tied with him in first place?
Draymond Green.
Nah, he's been out too many games.
We've referenced this player on the show already today.
Earlier today.
Future Hall of Famer, easily.
LeBron James.
No. Same team.
Westbrook. So I had it. Yeah.
Not Westbrook.
Oh.
Anthony Davis.
Nope.
Same team?
Same team.
Dwight Howard.
Right. Who else is a future Hall of Famer?
Carmelo.
Carmelo Anthony somehow is tied for league lead
running his
with
mouth.
Technical fouls. Like, I know that happens a lot to star players because you're griping for calls and everything, but like, Carmelo, it's been a minute. You don't get that treatment anymore. Like,
he still thinks he's a star. Well, and a lot of things are going wrong in LA, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not surprising. I guess a lot of things are going wrong right now for the Lakers.
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting. All right, I got a fun trivia question. I actually saw this on my Lebanese Fans of the NBA Facebook page. So I'm going off that. I did cross-reference and confirm this statistic, this trivia question. So obviously, we did at one point have high school athletes going straight to the NBA. Guys like LeBron James were the number one overall pick. More recently, you're in the one and done era. Guys like, obviously, Zion Williamson was number one overall as a one and done guy. Anthony Davis, number one overall. Here's a good question for you guys. When and who was the last 4-year player in college basketball to go number one overall in the NBA draft?
Tim Duncan?
No, not Tim Duncan. I think he might have. So this is right after Tim Duncan because everyone guessed Tim Duncan. I believe he did go number one and might have played 4 years, but he was, I think, the second to last guy.
Okay. 4-year starter went number one overall.
Yeah, 4 years of college basketball. Yep. So Tim Duncan, number one in the 97 draft. He did play 4 years in college. I believe he is the second to last guy. So that was 97. So it tells you that this was after 97 and obviously prior to 2021. So someone within the last 23, 24 years, whatever my math may be.
Kenyon Martin.
Tom Castleman.
Out of Cincinnati.
How about it? Kenyon Martin.
Wow.
Broken leg, right? Like he got drafted in spite of having a broken leg. That's how bad that draft class was.
Wow. I'm impressed, Tom. I was going to
can't
say,
even think
I
of
was about to
number
give
one
a clue.
picks.
This is a guy that Drew might have watched growing up because he
Yeah.
got drafted by the Nets, then went to the Nuggets. And that might have been right when Drew first started growing up watching basketball of the Nuggets.
Oh, yeah. Kmart, absolutely.
And obviously, Kenyon Martin drafted first overall out of Cincinnati in the 2000 NBA draft. A solid basketball player, but obviously not worth the number 1 overall pick. Has never made
but who
an
was
all-star
that
team.
year? Like,
Well, who else was in that draft? Pull up that draft.
Yeah.
Wasn't that like-
Let's see here.
isn't that considered like one of the worst drafts of all
The
time?
number 2 pick of the 2000 NBA draft, Stromile Swift
Oh, boy.
out of LSU.
All right, Stromile.
Darius Miles was number 3, who actually had a article in the last year.
Okay.
Like, where is Darius Miles? Mike Miller, and I'm just naming the
Out of Florida.
known guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds pretty
I mean,
bad. Kenyon Martin, by the way.
Jamal Crawford.
He might be the
Ooh.
best out of the entire class, and
Sure.
he was take off the bench, just add water, instant offense.
Sure.
Michael Redd, 43rd.
Oh, he might have been the best, actually. He was
Yeah.
good for a while.
Brian Cardinal, if you remember him.
I do. Hato Turkoglu, number 16.
Yeah. Eduardo
Wouldn't-
Nahara, Nuggets legend.
Yes. Wow, that draft class was really bad.
Jamal
Holy
Magloire,
cow.
he was actually pretty good.
Who was pretty good?
Jamal Magloire.
Okay,
That was
I remember
pretty all
him.
right.
Yeah.
Magloire, yeah.
Eddie House out of Arizona State was 37th overall.
Yeah.
Turkoglu, Prisbilla. Yeah, Jamal Crawford, a lot of 6-mans of the year.
Probably not a single, well, not probably. I could say with almost 99% certainty, not a single Hall of Famer in that class.
Oh, no.
Not even close.
The Notes player who selected at least one All-Star game. Kmart. Yeah.
I don't think he had an
That's a
All-Star
rough
game.
year.
Yeah, he did,
He did?
according to Wikipedia.
I'm looking at him right now. When did he have an All-Star game?
Kenyon
Martin?
Yeah.
0304.
Oh, 2004 All-Star, one-time All-Star. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, I would say for a number 1
That's a
overall pick,
rough
that's
year.
the least you can do. 12.7 rebounds over his career. He did pretty good in his All-Star game. 17 points, shot 80% from the floor. Okay. All right, Kenyon. Probably all dunks in the All-Star game format.
I think okay, all right, Kenyon is the perfect way to just kind of sum everything up.
Sure. Wow, that really was a
good
historically
pull
bad
there.
draft class.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'd
it
say
wasn't
Michael
great.
Redd and Jamal Crawford are probably the 2 best.
yeah.
I
Kenyon
think
Martin
Crawford
probably
had more
third, maybe
longevity,
fourth.
but Michael Redd was an all-star for a couple years. He was a good player for a few years.
Yeah, he had
yeah.
a much better peak.
And Turkoglu was okay, too.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, hey, good job, Tom. Tom's heating up with these trivia questions lately.
Love
I
it.
got all sorts of useless knowledge up here. It's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
I wish Stump the Schwab was still there. We should, team up 2-on-1, me and you against Stump the Schwab. See how we fare.
Probably not all that great.
Well, there's
Probably
one question.
self-inflating.
There's one question that I know we would all know that he didn't know. Record for most assists in an NBA game. Who was it? That's when I
Scott
stumped him.
Skiles with 31, right? For the
Yeah,
Orlando
Scott Skiles.
Magic?
I don't remember the number, but he didn't know who it was. He guessed Magic and Stockton, and neither of those. So cool. Are you looking it up, Tom, right now?
I am. Yeah, we can move on to the statements if you guys have stuff.
Sure. What do you, I know Drew's got a statement.
Oh, always. Watch college basketball.
There you go.
It's time. Wake up. Wake up out of
Drew,
hibernation.
What are your college teams? I know you had for college football. I know you work for IMG Radio as a sports producer. What are your basketball teams? I forgot to ask you. And maybe you have new ones come to tournament. What teams' games are you doing? Broadcasts?
Like on the air?
Yeah.
Retired from broadcasting. I am not doing broadcasting.
Well, no, you're not broadcasting the game yourself, but aren't you producing the broadcasts?
No.
No?
No.
News to me, man. What are you doing now?
Different role.
All right, the utility man.
Yes.
Wow. News
more
to
on
me.
more on the radio affiliate side of things now.
Okay, well, hey, maybe you'll tell me more after the show real briefly.
Sure.
But, hey, then you can make more picks for college basketball.
No.
More importantly, Drew.
No.
We need your exact picks for every game.
You know I don't do picks, Mr. Enchev.
Think of how much money our viewers can make listening to your picks.
Yeah, I can't do that for the company I work for.
All right, that's fair. Well, you can definitely unveil your English Premier Soccer League picks, which is
absolutely
the irony of how much luck it is involved in sports betting. Drew Brackett doesn't watch a lick of EPL soccer, but he is.
Whoa. Saturday morning, 8:30, waking up, having a coffee. Nobody's awake in the house. EPL is on.
Really?
Sure.
Okay. Well,
I'm not dedicated. No.
Okay.
You know,
interesting.
I have a million sports channels. There's always a soccer game on.
Well, needless to say, I follow soccer a lot more closely than Drew.
Of course.
And Drew Brackett seems to be getting all these soccer picks right, left, and right. So,
well, when you bet on Messi every game, there's a flaw in the system.
I'm telling you, man, it used to work every game. He's older now. Times have changed.
Maybe you need to find a new Messi.
No, Messi's still the best. It's actually not so much that he's obviously regressed a little bit, but he's gained so much respect. It's crazy. Like some of these lines for him to get goals and assists in his teams are so badly like against him. Like he has so much respect of the betting public. Like back in the day, like, you know, you can probably bet like minus 120 for him to score and he would do it every time. And now it's like, you know, it's like plus 100, but it's like he may go 4 games without scoring and they'll still throw it up at plus 100 just because of the sheer respect he has. But nonetheless.
And you're the guy who bets it.
Not recently. Not recently.
All right.
I did bet on PSG recently, and I got a last-minute goal from Mbappe to get the win against Real Madrid. So that was a good one. I haven't been betting much recently, Drew. Betting break.
Well, you can wait for the World Cup.
Oh, you better believe there'll be bets getting thrown out on the World Cup. That'll be fun.
Yes, you gotta factor in the weather there.
Yeah, it'll be like 100 degrees despite being in the winter in Qatar. It is hot there. Hot.
What happens when you play in the desert?
But I'll tell you what about the World Cup, though. It'll be good because a lot of times the World Cup is in the summer, right after these guys had a long club season. Granted, they take a few weeks off, but it's not the same. They'll have taken the entire summer off, and then they'll have played for maybe like 2 months of the club season, and then they'll go straight to the World Cup. So the beauty of this next World Cup, we should actually see everyone in form and well-rested. So that'll be really fun to see.
It will interrupt NFL playoffs, though, and bowl games.
Well, World Cup matters more. Once every 4 years, and it should be once every 4. I don't want the two-year things.
I don't think Tom Castleman will watch a lick of the World Cup.
No, he watches the World Cup. He told me.
I keep more tabs on that. It's like an Olympic level viewer experience for me.
Tom and I are getting together and watching the World Cup together this year. We'll make plans, Tom. Still got to meet my dog. Tom hasn't met my dog yet.
I have not.
Messi.
I've yet to meet Messi.
You got to meet Messi. He is a legend of the game. He's got his Bulgarian Martinica on to commemorate the start of spring coming up soon. So, yeah, it'll be fun. My statement of the week, by the way, just a little quick. I'll keep one part really brief, then I'll have more of an overarching sports statement. You know, we try to keep it more to sports, but I do think it's been cool seeing all the athletes across the world speak up about the situation going on in Russia. A lot of athletes have, worn shirts in support of Ukraine. There's been some sponsorships that have been dropped. So that's been kind of cool to see the athletic community kind of rally against Putin and what Russia's starting to do. I'll just keep it brief on that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And that's more of like a sort of a salute to what the athletes are doing, because they do have a very important voice in sports and beyond sports. Even no matter what Charles Barkley will tell you, I'm not a role model. Yes, you are. The minute you step on the field, you are most definitely a role model. And then finally, I hinted at this earlier, but my statement is, and this is saying a lot because you think about how many great quarterbacks we have in the NFL right now. My statement right now is that no league ever in any sport has had more stars at one position than the NBA has right now at the point guard position. And this is not even counting LeBron James, who is a point guard. I'm counting James Harden as a point guard if I'm not going to count LeBron. Listen to some of these names: Stephen Curry, Chris Paul, James Harden, Ja Morant, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, LaMelo Ball, Damian Lillard, DeJounte Murray, Kyle Lowry, Mike Conley, Darius Garland, who's killing it this year, D'Angelo Russell, underrated, Russell Westbrook, more young guys like Tyrese Halliburton, Josh Giddey, and more. We haven't even seen Jalen Suggs and how good he could end up being. So just the sheer amount of talent. I mean, you look at some of these guys, like obviously Westbrook shouldn't have been an MVP, but Harden, Westbrook, Curry, those guys have been MVP. Doncic and Paul have been really close to MVP. Dame time has been close to MVP. I mean, I think Ja Morant is in the MVP race, who we talked about. Certainly Luka, Trae Young, those guys will be in the MVP race in the future, if not this season, with how well they're playing. So, I mean, just the sheer amount of talent at the point guard position in the NBA is crazy to see. A lot of respect for what the guys are doing. And it shows to how the game has changed. Mm-hmm. It used to be the big man. It used to be George Mikan. Then it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain. And then obviously Shaq. We had David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, Karl Malone, all those guys. Now it's all about the guard, and specifically the shooting guard. It's interesting, or not the shooting guard, the point guard. Even though the point guard is sort of a shooting guard, and it speaks to how sports have advanced. Don't listen to anybody talking about the old school guys. The modern day players are the best we have. These guys can pass, shoot, and dribble across all five positions. And the point guards now can also score really well. But it's interesting because it used to be the center was the cool thing. Then MJ was the cool thing, the shooting guard, Kobe, Vince Carter, whatever. And now it's like the point guard is the cool thing. And not only when you're a point guard, you don't have to be Jason Kidd, John Stockton, Magic Johnson. Now you're the point guard and you're dropping threes, scoring 20 points a game. So I think we have more talent at that position now than we've had in any other sport in any position, whether it's like forwards in soccer, whether it's, quarterbacks in the NFL, whether it's first baseman in baseball, et cetera. More talent at a single position across all sports of all time. Never had more than we do in the NBA. And I listed off like about 15 guys, which just shows you that like any given night that there is a great point guard in pretty much any game that is being played.
Yeah, like that's the evolution of sport. I mean, like that's what you do with youth sports. You put the best athlete at quarterback because that's the person who touches the ball every single play. Basketball took a while, but they've gotten to the point where they say, hey, if you're the best player, we don't care how tall or how short you are. We no longer are relying on a physical profile. So we're actually seeing the best athletes make the most impact on a game from start to finish, as opposed to, hey, you just bring up the ball and pass to the guy who, the guy, capital T, capital G, is just bringing the ball up anyway.
Sure. And obviously with the increased notion of three-point play, traditional post player is not as important, but you can still survive as one because in many ways Giannis and Embiid are still doing that.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think that'll do it. That'll do it. Thank you very much, guys. Looking forward to talking next week. I think the big talking point next week is going to be the conference tournament picks for college basketball. And maybe I'll do a little digging and see how we fared with our regular season picks in terms of who would win each conference. I might have to do a little digging and see what our record was there. My best guess is that Drew Brackett was first because he seems to get everything right.
I don't even remember doing that.
You might have been out that week. Who knows? Who knows? Do you remember who you picked, Tom? I definitely remember picking Purdue in the Big Ten.
I have mine written down for the major conferences that we did.
Oh, and do you have ours too by chance?
No.
Okay.
Selfish like that.
Well, if you remember what date you wrote it down, maybe send me a message.
No clue.
All right. Well, hey, that's all right. Well, hey, that'll do it for this week. Thank you very much, guys, for being back. Thank you very much for all the listeners. Last week, Drew, Tom, and I did a show that was nearly 2 minutes and 2 hours and 2 minutes on 222. We were off by 11 seconds. Had I known, I would have stretched 11 seconds. I think we're right at the 2 hour mark again this week. So that means a lot of fun was discussed. We had a great time. Looking forward to plenty more sports chatter next week. See you guys. Thank you very much for watching and listening.